was interested in art and that type of industry or something to do with art. And I found this was one of the main parts of it, especially after doing the scientific training for 5 years. We then broke out into doing small animals. I mean, that was one of my very first sausage dog. And then we progressed to hedgehogs, mice, owls, sharks, and then putting them into bottles. Done some swans as well. So yeah, you name it, we tried it. Loads of these went to America, picking a pig, which were all really sidelines to the main factory. The company where I worked sold the branch in Cambridge, and the main managing director moved to Southampton to the other branch and his other partner, and invited me along to run or be a foreman type manager of the scientific side. But by the time I got down here, he'd already gone into making boats in bottles. So we then carried on that, and then in the finish, Jack Green was his name, and we moved over to Lymington and set up Lymington Glass Mystiques. They were doing them for Harrods and places in London. The basic knowledge to make something like that compared with something like that is a big, big difference, because this has to be done in sections. Each part is an individual, and then you put it on to the main body and build it up. So if you didn't have the knowledge of the scientific side, you wouldn't know how far you could go before a piece cracked or things like that. Yeah, all the little nitty gritty bits are very, very similar to doing scientific anyway. So you have large vessels with a boat, or you blow the flask up. So it's all the same sort of thing really, but just putting the boat in it rather than heating elements or something like that, or coils. So yeah, it was reasonably easy to transfer, but I was that artistic type flair to do it. I mean, a lot of the mass production side now, as I see it, is on a, you put a bit of glass onto a round table sort of thing, flames come in, flattens it all off, but this is done all by hand. So you'd have this in a lathe, which you would then have to put in, flatten off yourself and do the shaping. So it's all literally done by hand, because we never had anything that was mass produced. Something like that, when it was in a run, we would take 4.5, 5 hours to make. So you was lucky to get, really you'd be lucky to get one a day out.
The first time I ever saw a shipping bottle was at Pyrex, a lad called Alan Fraser. That was about 1964. And I remember thinking, oh, that's a good idea. I was just a young glassblower, he was a bit older, and that was the first time anyone at Pyrex had ever seen them either. It was only a very small one, and I don't know whether the original idea, if it had been done before, but no one else had ever seen one. And I remember thinking, that's a good idea, During break time, people used to mess about making glass animals and things like that, so I started doing ships and bottles. People were coming to us all the time, can you make us a shipping bottle, can you make us a shipping bottle? So I decided to set up at home doing them. It just grew from there. At Pyrex, during works time, when anybody was retiring or visitors would come, I'd make a glass shipping bottle and they'd be presented with a glass shipping bottle, because at that time it was a high-end product.
At that time, Pyrex was beginning to recede, they were becoming less and less profitable, and over time a lot of the glass workers were offered work down in the Midlands at the Quickfit Staffordshire plant, which was an offshoot of Pyrex, and a lot of them went to work down there, and eventually they closed the Pyrex lab apparatus department down altogether. Well, automatically the ones who didn't want to go and live in the Midlands stayed here, and it just coincided with the shipping bottle boom. So what did they do? They all started making ships in bottles in little workshops all over the town. There must have been 5 or 6 little workshops around Sunderland making nothing else but ships in bottles.
In 1982, they moved the Sunderland laboratory department down to Stone in Staffordshire, and it was then, I think after Andy had done some samples and whatever, Brian and 1 or 2 others left Pyrex and they started doing them ourselves, or doing them themselves. And when Pyrex, our department, closed altogether, we just all followed, because that's where the work was. When we first went in here, doing these from Cornings, we were making an absolute fortune in the time.
Because it was new.
It was new. We
were all going to like jeweller shops and places like
yes.
that. The one who going
Samuel was and all of them. There isn't actually skill in doing that. The same as what you were doing when you're manipulating scientific stuff. It took some learning, but it was easy to learn. If you were doing something new, and as I said, it used to take me a little bit longer to learn things than what others did, is what I've already spoken about. To get one and you just think, I've cracked it. That's really like, I've cracked that. That's great, that one. You know, I'm there, I can do it. Because it's not. It wasn't as easy for me as some, but I got there. And when I got there and I got one that was really, well, after that they were all really okay, but you think, well, that's it, that's how I've done it, great. And then the satisfaction is like, I mean, looking at these now and I'm thinking, well, I could have made that one, I could have made that.
Yes, we would call them minis, right? So you would learn on a mini, preferably just plain sails. You would do that for maybe I only done it for a week, and then I was given, you could then go on and go in the bottle. So initially just a week, just depending on yourself, how good you were, how easy you did pick it up. So you would basically get that hull and the masts, and there was nothing on it. Right, so we would get it, and you put it in a little holder, and then we would apply the sails.
Everything.
If it needed, say a mast on the back with a fancy flag on, or we would do all that, and then we would put the sails on, and then you would do all the rigging, and then you would put the flags on the top as well, and then put it down, and hopefully it wouldn't break. Didn't you?
Your rigging could have popped off. You know, your rigging, that could have popped off. Your sail could have flared. Do you know what I mean?
The hull, the mast on the hull could have actually flared.
They used to flare in the actual mast itself, right in the middle. Do yours ever do that?
Yeah. Is it a common thing?
Well, of course it is. Everything's got to be like spot on before like actually completely works.
You've got to join your rigging on a certain place right at the end, otherwise it just pops off. Your sail's got to be put on and then slightly pulled off. Do you know what I mean? To stop it from flaring. So there was, and sometimes the flared masts weren't necessarily our fault. There could have been the lads at the back of the factory who made the hulls on mass production. Because they'd done the same as us. They were doing mass production, so they could have hurried theirs through.
I know, but it was normally.
We used to get the blame, but initially it wasn't always our fault. But even if the mast had flared, we would get it back to fix. So we were actually heating up and trying to fix their flared masts as well, weren't we? Yeah.
You know, that looks like one of mine.
I thought them flags look like my flags, actually. They do look like my flags, don't they?
I think they're my flag.
Flags, yeah. So everything we done was mass. Everything was mass production, wasn't it? Basically, yeah.
Well, it felt like it.
Well, it was, yeah.
There wasn't millions of us doing making them, you know.
No, it was quite a hard job to learn. Very hard. It's amazing how many people came for the first week and then left. They always allowed you to make time and a half, so you could make 4 hours bonus a day. So that was 20 hours at the end of your working week, wasn't it? They always allowed you to do that. The target rate, you were allowed to do that.
Some of it wasn't realistic, like that ship there, the Spanish galleon. That target was far too high. You couldn't make any money on that.
But there was also a downside to it, because if you got carried away and you were just hoying them out of mass production, and they all failed when they got to quality control,
you got them all back.
You got them all back, and you had to sit and fix them.
At your expense.
Yeah, you would lose you lost your bonus for that day, and sometimes it could carry on to the next day. You know what I mean? So that's the way he sort of got you to make good stuff if you possibly could on mass production, because you would then lose money, wouldn't you, at the end of the day? But yeah, hard job. You enjoyed it, didn't you?
I did.
She did.
Good.
It was quite an achievement to win that export.
Well,
Queen's Export Award. It was quite an achievement, wasn't it? Works representative. You were classed as. She was classed as work representative, weren't you?
Yes, I was.
Yeah,
I forgot about that. Yes.
You were. That was your title, so that's why.
But I was just a worker though. We sit and making ships and bottles, and then we went down to see the palace and the Queen and everything. Which was, I met the Queen. I met Prince Philip. I met the Queen's personal, I think he was a vicar or something, John Major, Michael Heseltine. There was like loads of people there. Was it? Aye. And then we got the train there, and then we got the train back. And we'd done all that in less than like 8 hours. Down there, seen all that, and then back home.